Welcome to Daily Meditation with Sangha Live.
Thank you so much for this beautiful introduction, and thank you so much for having me back here. I want to just begin today with ringing the gong, so we can just listen to this, and then I'll say something about the theme. And I hope the sound was okay. I forgot to check if the sound is okay. But really, there's something about, listening to the sound of the gong and to be wake up and hear the sound of the gong and to be called to practice. And of course, we can wake up at any moment in our life. It doesn't have to be in the morning. So for some of you, it may not be the morning, but this sense of being called to practice, this sense of having a reminder for why it is that we're practicing, and then coming together around practice and just being aware that now we are here again and something has called us. We've heard the sound of the inner gong, our own commitment to practice, and now we are here. And just taking a moment also to feel this sense of how we are arriving from many different places, even from different continents. All of us is sort of arriving here, coming with, different dreams that may be still in the back of our mind, different experiences from our life today. And now we are sitting down here. And how we have this richness of experiences and how we have this richness of aspirations. How we have a richness of longing. And also how there's something that we have in common. And as we come up together around practice, around meditation, it's probably that we have something in common around this wish to wake up, this wish to be awake in our life. So we can appreciate that. We can appreciate our own calling, and we can appreciate this calling of everyone else. And appreciate, that there are structures, containers that makes it possible for us to support each other. And how meditation practice is really something that we don't just do it for ourselves, and it's not something we do alone, but really it's something that happens in community. When we sit down on our cushion, we don't just sit down alone. We sit down with having all beings as part of our awareness. We don't sit down with that sense of separation and isolation just to myself, but we have this possibility in our mind of it being of benefit to a larger degree also. And so this week we have this theme around compassion in action, and some of the practices that supports the recognition of compassion, but also supports us in bringing compassion into our life and really nourishes compassion in our life. And we started yesterday with a quote from the Indian scholar and practitioner called Shantideva, where he talks about this a flash of lightning when the cloud is dark, when the night is dark, and there is this flash of lightning that lights up everything. And he compares compassion to that flash of lightning where we come really close to reality. And also saying that if we're not mindful, then it can be something that can easily disappear again. So there's a starting point, which is our recognition of our natural compassion that can arise the moments when we are in touch with suffering. And I think we talked about it also, how we all have this experience of opening of the heart when we get in touch with our own vulnerability, when we get in touch with others' vulnerability, or situations where there is this natural movement of doing what we can, and where we are having this experience of stepping aside from this sort of narrow sense of self to something that's much larger, where there isn't this division between me and others. And this is a very important experience when we have that, because we begin to see in these moments also how this, taking care of myself, benefiting myself, is not opposed to being there for others. Actually, that these moments when our hearts are open and we're in touch with natural compassion, and we may be sort of benefiting others, but how these are also moments where we are in touch with a deep sense of meaningfulness, and where we are in touch with a deep sense of aliveness, and where we are in touch with a deep sense of being who we are. We have a deep sense of actually inner alignment and inner connectedness. So these are moments that really are showing us how benefiting others and benefiting ourselves is not something that is opposed, but actually, like the Buddha also said, when by taking care of oneself, we take care of others. By taking care of others, we take care of ourselves. So we begin to have that experience, and that may not always be our experience, because sometimes, very often, due to our own individual history, due to the context that we're born into and so forth, we have this sense of separation and division. And we begin to see how much loneliness there is also with this sense of separation and division. And we talked about it yesterday also, how it's this broadening of our inner models, right? Of our inner models of what it is that we perceive as kin, what kind of world it is that we live in, that we can live in a world where what we perceive as kin is a very small circle, or we can live in a world where what we experience and see as kin is a much larger circle. And that has influences in what we do. So this actually will determine our actions, and this will also determine how we perceive the world and how we feel about the world. And that these inner models, they can get activated and they can get primed, but we have an opportunity actually to consciously be aware of where we are, how open our heart is, how closed it is. And by having that awareness, we become more and more familiar with what it is that supports the opening of the heart, what conditions it is what actions it is that supports the opening of the heart. We get more and more familiar with what it is that keeps us in tangles and sort of closes our hearts. And a very, very important point is that it's not about making ourselves wrong, and it's not about having an ideal and say, I should always be in this way, I should always have an open heart, I should always be, in another way that's out in the future, right? So we begin to have this discrepancy between where we are and how we are and how we ought to be. And that's just a doorway to more dissatisfaction, right? So there's a lot of wisdom in understanding that, of course, we have our different patterns, we have our different habits, and that they are actually also rooted in wisdom. They're there for good reasons. But sometimes they are also becoming a little bit outdated because they are habitual. And that's why it can be really helpful to spend time looking at it. And so we're training our mind, we're training our heart, acknowledging that we will always be changing, but if we can actually influence also the direction that we're changing in. So it's very, very important that we're not making ourselves wrong, and we don't just have an ideal about how we ought to be, but we bring care and understanding to our situation moment by moment. And that care and understanding that we are bringing to actually seeing who we are, seeing how we are, this is also what allows more space so that a change can begin to happen naturally, because change is who we are. This is part of who we are. So there may be some things where it's a little bit stuck, but movement and change is natural. This is part of who we are, just like everything else that we see around us. Like I look out the window and I look at change, right? So now I can gently feel how spring is arriving, and few months ago it was a very different feeling as we were moving into winter and so forth. So change is something that's completely natural. So yesterday, from having that basis of seeing how compassion is something that's natural, it's part of who we are, and yet it's also something that can get a little bit blocked, by seeing that we can have that wish to really be in that way and to allow ourselves to be in that way, and by living in a world where our heart is more open. And then so we have that wish, and that's called the aspiration of an awakened heart. And then in the Buddhist tradition, there's some guidelines for how we can actually bring that into action. And that's called the qualities of the Six Paramitas. So these are qualities that also are present in our life, that can be nourished. And when they are rooted in wisdom, then they genuinely becomes transcendent. And paramita means the other shore. So these are qualities that can take us from entanglement, that can take us from suffering to more freedom and to liberation. So these are the qualities that we are looking at here this week, and we are looking at how to nourish in our life. And we started yesterday with the quality of generosity. And this morning we also heard about generosity. And generosity, we talked about it, how generosity, the essence of generosity, is a mind that's able to let go. A mind that can let go. How the essence of generosity is not clinging, it's not holding. And we can see in our life how much suffering there is when we're not in touch with this quality of being able to let go, but when we are clinging and when we are grasping. And the invitation was to begin to look at moments in our life and in our practice where our mind is in a way where it's open and where it's able to let go. And of course, when the mind is in a way where it's able to let go, when it's open and more spacious, that's also when the hands begin to be able to give, and our actions begin to be expressions of generosity also. But it's very important that it's not just morality that we should do so and so, but it's really about learning to see that quality of being able to let go and to begin to recognize the sense of ease and joy that it's also associated with. And the quality of wisdom comes in with also seeing that, it's not so personal, that it's not, a lot of the things that we hold on to, it can be thought patterns, I am, ideas about ourselves, how they can become really solid, and we identify with this sense of self, and this is really me. And sometimes it's sort of associated with something pleasant when we feel that we are, in a way we would like to be. But often it's also associated with something that's not so pleasant, when we feel that we are in a way we don't want to be. But there's this sense of clinging. And then we begin to see that, oh yeah, actually, when I can broaden that, and I can let go of the identification with that as being me, when my mind is able to see it in a broader perspective, how that's an act of generosity, not putting myself into a small box, but actually having a broader perspective, seeing that I can be in many different ways. Of course, it's also related to moments where we are actually giving. And I think many of us, we can also think about times, when we are happy, when we are at ease, when we are in touch with appreciation, and how that's also oftentimes when we see a natural generosity. It's not uncommon, when people have been having a party and there is extra food, when they are happy, and then they, share it with their neighbors, share it with others, right? So these are moments when, because we are happy, we are appreciative, we are out of scarcity mode, then it's very easy for us to get in touch with this natural generosity. So these are some of the things we begin to see, and we begin to see how it's related to this inner quality of ease and well-being. So we had the invitation to look at that in our practice, and also to look at that in our life yesterday. And maybe we will hear from people later on. So the next quality is ethical conduct. Sometimes it's called discipline. It's Shila, and it's said that the essence of ethical conduct or discipline is restraint or confidence. So I wanted to read a quote from a book. It's from Jetsuma Tenzing Palmo. She's a Tibetan teacher. She spent 12 years in a cave in the Himalayas in retreat, and so she has a lot of experience with being with herself. But she talks about a container for our meditation practice, for our spiritual cultivation. And she says these basic rules of conduct: not killing, not stealing, being very careful and responsible in our sexual conduct, having ethical speech, and not destroying our minds through drugs and alcohol. These are eternal rules of conduct. It's like a cup. If we want to pour in the elixir of the Dharma, we have to have something to support it in. We have to have something to contain it. So it doesn't just run away everywhere and get wasted. It holds it, it contains it. So likewise, for our spiritual cultivation, we need a container. And this is our basic ethical conduct, that we live in this world in a way that any being who comes into our presence know they have nothing to fear from us, because we're not going to hurt them. We're not going to steal from them. We're not going to misuse them. We're not going to cheat them. They are safe with us. And we are also safe with ourselves because we know we're not going to do these things, because we have promised ourselves and the Buddhas not to do that. So I think for me, this sums it up really, really beautiful. And, this vision of, and this possibility of being in the world in a way where any being who comes into our presence knows that they have nothing to fear from us. So for me, when I sense into that, I can just feel how my body relaxes, and this sense of trusting oneself, this sense of confidence that comes and that we get in touch with when we are in a way where we're not harming ourselves, where we're not harming others. I think for me, this really helps to see how it's rooted in confidence, how it's linked to confidence, how it's linked to trustworthiness, and how it's linked to this sense of transparency. And this is where we can begin to see in our own lives, we all, of course, because we are on the path, right? So we will get mindless, and we will get triggered, and we will do things that we regret. But I think we can also see, that when we are in ways that we regret, when we are harming ourselves, when we are harming others, even though it's not intentional and so forth, it's often because we are mindless. We can also see how this is really what is also often disturbing our minds. This is what we come back to again and again in regret. I know very well times when I say something, and then, I was whatever, caught in something, I said something, how this is something that I can ruminate about, how this is something that really disturbs my peace of mind. And this sense of when we can have this wish, to be in a way where we are transparent, and where we are where we can trust ourselves, and where we have this confidence in, this confidence of not harming. And, there traditionally we would talk about, these qualities of ethical conduct, that we can look at what not to do. So, and this is what we talked about here, that there are certain behaviors that we refrain from, and are really mindful about having as training principles. There's something that we do. There's something that we train in doing. So seeing how our actions and our behaviors and our thoughts is linked to like a root system, right? And that root system is really what we're doing. It's like, we are feeding certain roots that makes it much more likely that, this kind of behaviors and thoughts and action will also come in the future. So we can have this intention to do helpful things, to do positive things, to do wholesome things, right? So we have this aspiration to live our life in wholesomeness. And then the third is this actually setting out to benefiting others, intentionally doing what we can to benefit others. So this is the training in these qualities, and the way we bring it into our practice. It can be, to look at this aspiration not to harm, and to look at this aspiration of our commitment. So let's bring some of this into our practice today. So I invite you to take a moment to just come back to the situation you're in. Maybe you've been listening, and now just pausing a moment. Maybe allowing your awareness to come to the body. So this sense of allowing the mind and the body to come together. And in a very gentle way, connecting with your experience right now. The sense of listening, opening up and listening to the moment. Or sensing in whatever way you're doing it. For some of us, we are listening to the body. Some of us, we are sensing it. Sorry. And then bringing awareness to how you're sitting. And this principle of not harming. And just looking to if there's any adjustments that will support you in really embodying care. Embodying kindness, respect for the body, for the situation that you're in. It may be adjusting so that the body is in a way where the muscles can be as relaxed as possible. It may be bringing awareness to the feet, and if they're on the ground, to just really feeling the ground and that sense of connection and groundedness. It may be bringing awareness to the breath and inviting the breath to move in and out naturally. Without forcing anything. Maybe bringing awareness to the mind. Noticing if the mind is quiet or very busy or something in between. And giving up this demanding that things should be different, that we should be different. And appreciating this commitment to practice. This commitment to practice moment by moment. To practice not harming, to practice understanding, to practice kindness. To any degree possible, moment by moment. The confidence that comes from knowing what our practice is. The sense of honesty. So we're just practicing in this way, being with ourselves in this way. Meeting the moment in this way.
Today's podcast is an offering to you from our archive of freely available live daily classes. We make wisdom teachings and meditations as freely available as possible to as many people as wish to practice. You can help ensure we can continue to support a worldwide Sangha by leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts, by sharing this with someone who'd be interested, and by offering a small financial support at sangha.live/donate.